Black Widow is finally the first MCU movie we have had in almost 18 months. What is up, YouTube, and welcome to this Black Widow breakdown, a recap, and ending explained. Now, Black Widow itself is a neat, self-contained story, which, in my opinion, would have been a lot better if it was told many years ago and actually come out in between possibly Civil War and Infinity War, or maybe even what they did with Ant-Man and the Wasp, where they told a story pre-snap. And it's a bit of a shame that we are getting this so far after everyone, almost every Avenger, had their own origin movie. But this is far, far from an origin story, which is a little bit disappointing in my eyes to not get that, having been a fan of the MCU since I first saw Iron Man when it came out. Now, the movie is set between the end of Civil War and just before Steve breaks everyone out of the raft. Of course, we know that Natasha did sadly perish, making the ultimate sacrifice on Vormir, leading to a death which is briefly addressed. Now, the movie is more focused on the family Natasha had, a more adopted family, and finishing in unresolved business, obviously, before she did die there in Endgame. Now, while the story was interesting, it had some very, very big comparisons to Captain America: Winter Soldier. The movie opens in the 90s in not only a pivotal time for Russia post-Iron Curtain collapse, but also the ever-expanding MCU, with this flashback scene being set in the same year as Captain Marvel, which of course led to the Avengers Initiative. We also had a similar soundtrack with Smells Like Teen Spirit playing later, while Come As You Are played in Captain Marvel, or at least was on the soundtrack. But that's where the similarities begin and end for Marvel's 90s era. Now, as well as this, in the 90s, we did also have the Winter Soldier kill Tony Stark's parents. He was ready to comply in 1991. So that means we've got another part of the 90s, which was pretty darn interesting. And of course, the Winter Soldier does heavily connect to the Black Widow movie. And I am desperate for this 90s to expand and further parts that were mentioned in the unexplored sections of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Natasha, with her adoptive spy family, are in America to infiltrate the North Institute. It's a very deep cut for Marvel Comics Easter eggs, and the North Institute were employed to wipe out all of the Widows due to the tech used in the Widows being bought by a rival agency. However, they are simply here in the MCU as a cover for S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra S.H.I.E.L.D., working on the Winter Soldier data as they mapped the brain, and Dreykov sent Alexei and the crew on this mission. It's a very, very weird group to merge together, considering that Alexei was the husband of Natasha in the comics, up until his death was faked, leading her to be gaslit into joining the Red Room. Now, Yelena was the rival of Natasha, becoming the new Black Widow after Natasha went west and tangled when they came face to face over getting a dangerous toxin known as the Deathless Frenzy. It would turn people into primal rage madmen. Melina was also the Iron Maiden, who had a fierce hatred of Natasha, and even the villain, Dreykov, is similarly a composite mix of every male Russian villain that Natasha has faced off, which tops off how just bizarre this adaptation from almost the entire history of Natasha's comic book run really is. It is a bizarre set of events, and I personally would have preferred more of a proper origin story. Now, Dreykov is possibly single-handedly the worst villain in the MCU, even worse than the ones who are just opposites of the heroes that the MCU had a real bad rap for, such as Yellow Jacket or Obadiah. While Alexei clearly completed his mission, they have to escape with Natasha's American dream coming to an end, and we saw her early love, of dyeing her hair. Russian spy cells are nothing new in the US, and they escape as Melina takes the family album as a keepsake, with all the fake photos that we saw being taken in the opening credits, which just gives us an indication that Yes, this wasn't just a mission, but it was a family affair. No, that wasn't a Mary J. Blige reference. We then have the family head to the airstrip as Natasha's dream is gone of living away from the Red Room while American Pie plays. It's funny as this song is often misinterpreted, much like Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, as it is more about the true Americana dying in the liberal 60s, which makes sense as the American dream and idea of Western life was based on 50s America, which Natasha looks at forlorn as they drive by. However, they escape after being attacked by SHIELD agents, but I wonder if they are Hydra or, SHIELD. It's an interesting one. We see Red Guardian at the airfield show off his strength, indicating him having taken the super soldier serum, as the character was essentially the counterpart to Captain America in the comics, and he was in the wild for 3 years on the mission. He wants to get out in the field again, and I would love to see more of this history, and considering that Janet Van Dyne was lost in the quantum realm as part of a Soviet rocket mission, it isn't out of the realms of possibility that Alexei probably tangled with Bill Foster and Hank Pym way back when, an era of the MCU that is in dire need of expansion. After all this, they arrive in Cuba and Melina is presumed dead by the girls, which is a bit of a weird one. Why would Alexei not just go, yeah, she's not dead? Because he literally said to Dreykov that, well, she's going to survive. Now, I found it odd that Alexei just ended up in jail after this, and while he gave some wishy-washy excuses about the state moving away from the ideals that he was obsessed with, it would have been nice to see him confront Dreykov, and really he was more of a side character. But due to David Harbour's presence, he felt way much more like a main character, as did Yelena, with Florence Pugh stealing the show heavily. But was that any surprise with her being the scene stealer of Little Women and a powerhouse in Midsommar? The mission is over as the girls are sent to the Red Room, and we see how the girls are taken and the weak ones are cold. Now, we saw parts of this in Age of Ultron with Madame B encouraging Natasha, and also in Agent Carter with Dottie Underwood, a graduate of the predecessor of the MCU Red Room. They are indoctrinated to look at Western cartoons and all act the same so they can embed and do their missions. Yelena was the new star of the Red Room in the comics, and considering that this was set in 1995 with Natasha being a relic of possibly the Soviet age in between eras, Yelena after 95 would have been mind controlled. We're using the kind of new tech as well. So it really does feel like this is ready to set her up as the new Black Widow, or possibly the Red Widow. It's ironic, Smells Like Teen Spirit Plays, a song about the nihilistic freedom, the ultimate grunge anthem, or whatever, as the girls are now taken to be assassins/slaves. However, we catch up with Natasha 21 years later. Clearly it is while she is on the run, and the others are also on the run, who are captured and put in the raft. I hope we get a story of Cap during this time, as we see Secretary Ross, as Natasha roasts him, mention his triple bypass, and that was also referenced when he did meet the Avengers to talk about the Sokovia Accords. It happened to him, and it meant he had to leave the military and went into the government. And at some point, I really can see him being the MCU president. However, he's in the wrong place, and she heads away on a ferry. Also mentioned by Ross was how she assaulted the King of Wakanda, which was when she shot T'Challa so Bucky and Steve could escape. Now we cut to Yelena on a mission with the other widows to take down Oksana, which leads Yelena to have her mind control wiped due to a red mist that was created to destroy the brainwashing. It's interesting as Yelena sort of matches the Red Widow story, a girl saved by Natasha sort of, and went on to take on an homage codename and had a friend in America called Oksana, which seems to be merging Yelena's story of becoming a Black Widow in their comics. But she's disavowed and the Taskmaster is sent in. Now, the Taskmaster is vastly different from the comics, and I can only imagine the actual comments that will be on this video and also on Twitter and other people's videos. In the comics, Anthony Masters was blessed with photographic reflexes and grew up and joined S.H.I.E.L.D. only for an accident to leave him to become a villain, and made a training house for people as he could teach vigilantes to fight, just like the Avengers. But later the Avengers were called in to take him out, and he was brought in sometime later to train John Walker in the Captain America fighting style when he became Captain America. Now, if you watch my Falcon and the Winter Soldier videos, I did really expect that to happen here in the MCU. It absolutely made sense. But no, Dreykov's long-thought-dead daughter, at least by Natasha, is actually Antonia, the Taskmaster who, due to what happened in Budapest, had brain damage and a chip inserted into her brain. We see her watching Clint versus Black Panther, learning the moves she would later mimic. She uses a shield much like her comic counterpart, mainly to fight like Cap and even a sword like the comics. One of the widows does say smile, which probably makes sense if the identity of the Taskmaster is an open secret and they would kind of sympathise with a young girl who was forced to grow up and become a human weapon. We catch up with Natasha with her plug, Rick Mason. He is a pretty deep-cut Marvel character, being the son of the Tinkerer, and was also known as the Agent in his own comic called, well, The Agent. But here, he is a former, and yes, that is Luke from The Handmaid's Tale. We stand a supportive king. I hope we see more of him in the MCU moving forward, and should hopefully appear in whatever is next from Yelena and the Widows. I love how she watches Moonraker, and there's some superb parallels to Dreykov and Hugo Drax as a generator goes out, and Taskmaster and Jaws. However, Rick has given her some stuff from her Budapest safe house, or should I say Budapest, that she is shocked at. Part of the pile of letters were the vials of red mist that Yelena has found. We would learn from the conversations with Yelena and Natasha that the reason she was surprised that the safe house was still active is that the long-teased Budapest incident, or Budapest, was that she killed Dreykov's daughter and saw her as collateral damage when she was actually in the building that Natasha called the bomb to be blown up in. It is a big one there and was the final part of her step to defect to S.H.I.E.L.D. This then led her and Barton to fight tooth and nail, and also hiding under a train station for a few days. It's funny that she said this is like Budapest in the Battle of New York, because, well, it is sort of similar that they are being chased throughout a city, and Clint says he remembers it different, but maybe Natasha is more correct here. Now, the contents of Natasha's boot is why Taskmaster attacks like Captain America and swings like Spider-Man to secure the package. Yelena would explain why she was not killed or assassinated, which is due to her status in the superhero world, and Dreykov would face the might of the remaining Avengers, and thus she gets yeeted off the side of the bridge, akin to the time that Cap yeeted that guy off the ship in Winter Soldier. Now she heads back to Budapest to meet Yelena for a family reunion many, many years in the making. It's a true shame that we jump from 1995 to 21 years later, as I was really hoping this would show her time either in the Red Room's employment and how she defected. The plot of the movie feels like a bit of a letdown, just like we had with Captain Marvel, how the Kree-Skrull War was just minuscule in the movie, when that could have been an Avengers movie across 3 movies. But it's not long before they are attacked by Widows and the Taskmaster as they have to escape, and we see what happens to fallen Widows as Dreykov forces them to commit suicide due to the control tech in their brain, which was harrowing to see as they escape through the city chased by the Taskmaster, who does his best Hawkeye impression, firing an arrow that bounces up as they do go to the train station that her and Clint hid in. After this, they have a neat heart-to-heart, and we see the origins of Natasha's Infinity War vest, as it was Yelena's and given to Natasha at the end of the movie. I wonder what weird things we will get an origin story for next, after Nick Fury's eye, the vest, and Budapest are now resolved. Maybe we will see Peter Parker dumpster diving to find the original Spider-Man suit there. They sit and talk and eventually decide to go after Dreykov, But they need one man, the Red Guardian, baby. Man, David Harbour knocked it out of the park here. As we see him in jail, arm wrestling and getting tattooed. He has Lenin and Karl Marx tattoos and various other Russian prison tattoos, which all have their own meaning. It's funny as he breaks the hand of Ursa, who in the comics was a Russian mutant known as Ursa Major and can transform into a bear and was with the Red Guardian in the Winter Guard team. Now Alexei lies about fighting Captain America, which could have been Isaiah Bradley, as he was let out of jail in the 80s, so maybe they could have one last mission. However, it's probably more Alexei desperate for a true rival, as they are complete opposites. Cap, the symbol of capitalism, and Alexei, the symbol of the Soviet struggle. However, he does appear to be a huge star in the history of Russia, as an earpiece was sent to him inside a Russian Guardian toy, and he escapes as pure chaos rains down as the two widows attack wearing the same outfit as Natasha did in Black Widow Deadly Origin, which was a real fun action scene there as well. But the day is saved as the girls reconnected with their dad, in quotation marks there. It's an uneasy reunion for the adoptive family, as Yelena reminds him that them going back into the Red Room system did force them to be rendered infertile, just like we had back in Age of Ultron when Natasha mentioned that to Bruce Banner. And Alexei hits back at how Natasha has been defected and indoctrinated to the Western agenda as they make a forced landing, which was pretty funny after some very tense scenes. On the ground, he's more interested in finding out if Cap still talks about him. I do hope that that history is explored somewhere. A Cold War Avengers series would be sublime, and we get a callback to Loki being Captain Avengers, where he called Natasha Dreykov's daughter and mentioned her ledger gushing red with blood, with Alexei saying a similar thing to the girls, whilst saying how proud he is of them. At Melina's compound, we learn what happened after the mission to Ohio, and how Dreykov can literally control the movement of the widows using a tablet. However, it's a dysfunctional dinner, and hey, we've all had family dinners as they split off. Now, Alexei tries to comfort Yelena, who was so young in 1995 that she felt it was a true family, and even calls Alexei the Crimson Dynamo by mistake. Interesting Easter egg there, as the first Dynamo was Anton Vanko, the father of Whiplash in the MCU, but in the comics he was the target of Natasha working for the Soviets in one of her first appearances in the comics, and I can probably see the Crimson Dynamo appearing again in the MCU, albeit with a different person. We see Melina still has the family photos, and we learn that while Natasha's birth parents sold her to the state, her mother pursued her with tenacity, causing a problem leading to her execution. She was buried in an unmarked grave by a blossom tree, the same place Natasha's memorial was in the post-credits scene. However, Natasha and Melina have a plan to use the same face tech thingy, Mission Impossible style face masks Natasha used in Winter Soldier with the Security Council, and also used in the first issue of Black Widow Deadly Origin. They plan that Natasha can meet Dreykov and overcome the convenient pheromones, that wasn't it, by getting him to hit her, but he's such a weakling she has to end up breaking her own nose, and Melina trying to land the airship. However, the airship does look incredibly similar to the Triskelion and the helicarrier. However, on the Red Room, we get the big reveal of just who the Taskmaster is. It's a true letdown, and while I understand the idea behind Trevor Slattery, this was just naff. It wasn't funny like we had Ben Kingsley doing a whole British guy from Croydon impression. It did remind me of the Winter Soldier reveal of Bucky, and well, that whole thing took place on an airship, didn't it? But here, Melina does a Barton and blows up the engine, causing it to freefall while Alexei fights Taskmaster, who does her best Black Panther pose. While we also had Yelena kill Dreykov, who is, like I said, single-handedly the worst MCU villain of all time. Proper terrible villain, forgettable, uninteresting, and lacking of almost all gravitas. However, in more Winter Soldier parallels, we see Natasha and Taskmaster fall to the ground, but this time the widows take her. I wonder where she will go next, and considering the post-credits scene, which I'll talk about in a minute, I think she might be recruited by Val. The widows leave with Yelena, Melina, Alexei, as Natasha is left alone to deal with Ross, which, yeah, I really thought about this, but I don't know how she got away with that one. I rewatched the movie set chronologically after this, and Natasha is clearly a fugitive. Maybe a mini truce was called after her taking out Dreykov, but I can't see Secretary Ross doing that at all. Now, after this, we did have Natasha get the Quinjet that she would use to help Steve go and break everyone out of the raft, which was really damn cool. And of course, Clint went home to his family. Well, Scott Lang also went off to have his house arrest, as we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and actually fall out with the Wasp herself. So it's a very cool thing here, and I really do hope that we get to see more of Rick Mason. And we cut to the post-credits scene as Yelena grieves for her adoptive sister. A loud hay fever sufferer is heard. It's clear as day that this was most definitely the debut appearance of Val, or supposed to, as due to COVID, Falcon and the Winter Soldier got swapped over with Black Widow's release. She is, of course, the recruiter of US agent John Walker, and in the comics worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., only to be revealed in Secret Warriors when she infiltrated Hydra, but she actually worked for Leviathan, a sort of Russian-specific Hydra. It's unclear if this story would be the same here, but her debut was supposed to be given a mission to a Russian national. Now the mission, well, she seems to be doing something somewhat of a favour for Yelena here by giving her a dossier on the person who actually killed Natasha, or at least was to blame for her death, on Vormir. It's a weird one, and I do wonder what happened and why, because I think the story of how Natasha died, surely that would make it out that, well, it wasn't Clint Barton to explicitly blame. It just was one of those things, and he did try to actually stop her and sacrifice himself instead. However, where will this go next? Well, we do have a Hawkeye show coming up, and, well, the Tracksuit Mafia are going to be behind this. So we have a Russian connection already in the Hawkeye TV show. So that would be interesting to see where that goes. And I do think we possibly are getting a Dark Avengers or possibly a Thunderbolt with Val leading the crew. But that is it for this video. That was a long one. Please do hit that like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe with notifications on, and, well, I'll be back with more content all week for Black Widow. I'll see you soon, and goodbye.